TV. It is produced by the People-Pueblo Party, whose motto is common sense politics for the people, for the planet, and for the animals. Is also sponsored by the People's Health Project Incorporated. They provide us with the resources in order to have the conversations that we have on this show. And, I'm just really happy to be here. So much has gone on in the past year. I think today is the anniversary of the killing of Breonna Taylor. Also, this is March, which was the beginning or the official beginning of the pandemic here in New York City. And as we know, over 500,000 people have died unnecessarily in this country. And so I'm just going to bring on my guest, and then I'm going to finish the introduction, and then we're going to get into today's show. So, of course, I have to bring on my co-host, Brother Bill. Let me bring him on now.
Good evening, Mark. Good evening, everyone. Again, I just want to echo what Mark said. Big up to sisters, no matter what your ethnicity, religious belief, or non-religious belief. We know that everything comes through you, and that you're often overlooked and underappreciated too. But it's good that they felt the need and was smart enough to put aside a month so that we can give you your due for that it's definitely not enough. But we welcome you and we look forward to hearing what the sisters have to say and bring to the platform, because we know that they make us whole. So welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to bring on Sister Isolina de la Cruz for our International Working Women's Day, or rather International Working Women's Month. And Isolina de la Cruz studied criminal justice at John Jay College. For many years, she worked with survivors of intimate partner violence to help them break the cycle of abuse.
Wow.
Currently, she works as an outreach director for the City of New York, coordinating efforts to provide New Yorkers in underserved communities access to key city services. Her life's purpose and work have led her to travel extensively through Latin America in political delegations, learning about social movements in the region. She has organized with local groups in New York City around building solidarity with Latin American socialist movements. So Isolina, welcome. I still have to do a Stop COVID segment before we get into the main show, but thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I hope this is the beginning of many visits back to the show.
Thank you. I hope so too.
All right. So we also have another guest for tonight, and her name is Esperanza Martel, longtime activist, organizer. I know at one time she was a member of Comité MIMP on the Upper West Side, I believe was the main office. Also a fighter for Puerto Rican independence and for political prisoners, among many other things. And so, we still haven't done our Stop COVID segment, but SB, I wanted to welcome you to the show. I know you've been a viewer of the show and have helped us with really insightful comments and questions. So, I'm really happy that you're finally here. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bill. And Miss Lovely Solina. Thank you.
Thank you, SB.
All right. So in this next short segment is called our Stop COVID segment. And, I teach high school. And so my students are doing a Google Slides project, because we're working on computers. We're not in the school building. And one of the things they have to do is they have to look at 9 different countries, including Cuba, including Vietnam, including China, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Singapore, Japan, Taiwan. And these are all countries where there are no new variants. There are no new variants. These are countries that don't have any new COVID cases. These are countries where the economy is opening up. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a math teacher. He grew up, was born and raised in Brooklyn. He's African American. He teaches math in China. And people in China, they're resuming, they're going back to stadiums, they're watching sports games, they're in Vietnam, the economy is opening up, the economy, the GDP is growing already. And they didn't depend on vaccines to defeat COVID. What they did was they did what I did and others did here in Harlem when tuberculosis was an epidemic. You test people, you treat people, you take care of them, you provide food and rent and transportation. You isolate them when they're infectious. And that's what these 9 countries did. And because they did that, now they're moving beyond COVID. They have new normals, right? Because life isn't what it used to be. But those economies are opening up. People are moving on with their lives. People going back to school. So, one of the things that we talk about in my social studies class is how neoliberalism, which is one of the worst forms of capitalism. Capitalism is bad enough, okay? It's bad enough because it caters to the rich. But neoliberalism in this country is an extreme form of capitalism where the government explicitly caters to billionaires. And so over 500,000 people died of COVID in this country unnecessarily. And it's because we don't have universal health care. We don't have the infrastructure to address COVID and other pandemics the way they have in those 9 countries. And so, I just wanted to highlight that because there's this misconception that the rest of the world is doing as terribly as we're doing. Right, because now we have in this country, the Brazil variant, we have the UK variant, we have the South African variant, and we have a New York City variant, right? And so because our capitalist system and this system operates on neoliberalism, the government can't think of any solutions outside of solutions that provide profits to corporations and billionaires. And that's why this country depended so heavily on vaccines, because it does not have the infrastructure, does not have the political, economic will to take care of people. So that's what we're faced with. And so that leaves us with a couple of things to think about. One is that we have to change the system in this country. We have to organize. We have to change this system. And tonight's show is about women in leadership. And there are many historical instances and current instances of women leading us to produce the change that we need in this country. And so on that note, I know Sister Isolina has prepared a statement for us. And so we're going to go to her, and I'm going to open up her mic now. So Sister Isolina, thank you for being here and welcome. Your mic is now open.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to the People-Pueblo Party for opening this space. Happy International Working Women's Month to all the women out there. And thank you for having me here. And I want to begin by acknowledging that yesterday was the 3rd anniversary since Marielle Franco was killed in Brazil. And 2 days ago, the 13th, was the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Breonna Taylor. This violence is unfortunately all too familiar and a direct result of the racist gender violence that Black women face everywhere. In both cases, justice has not been served. And just like Marielle and Breonna, there are many names of victims that we will never know. So I ask everyone to light a candle, say a prayer for Marielle, for Breonna, and for all the other victims whose names we'll never know. Today, though, I want to focus on the struggles of women in Latin America, the historical challenges, and the legacy of some of the women who have been fighting for change in the front lines. And I want to read a brief statement, an excerpt from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, because this really summarizes, I feel like, in a really, really good way, what the women's struggle in Latin America and feminism represent, and the struggles that they have pretty much, or what has defined the struggle of women in Latin America. And so Latin American feminism is rooted in the social and political context defined by colonialism, the enslavement of African peoples, and the marginalization of Native peoples. Latin American feminism focuses on the critical work that women have undertaken in reaction to the forces that created this context. At present, the context is dominated by neoliberal economic policies that, in the environment of globalization, have disproportionately impacted the most vulnerable segments of society. So, with that said, the struggle for women's rights in Latin America and for gender equity has always been, at least in my opinion, anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist. Women in Latin America have often been at the forefront of the resistance and the political struggle. And even if their names may have been erased, their legacy cannot be erased. And women's ideas about resistance that lead to systemic transformation wasn't always understood as feminist. Our struggles precede that label, if you will. Some of the ideas that led to women's struggles and the ideas that led to women fighting in the front lines were not necessarily specific about women issues. They were more generally understood as a political struggle focused on improving the material conditions of poor and working class people. Their ideas were about systemic transformation that converged with other political projects. So there are many women, some better known than others, and some, like I said, that we may never know, or whose names we may never know, that have exemplified that struggle, that lucha, beginning with the struggles against colonization. We have Ana Caona, the Taino chief, Acacica. We have Barahunda, who I just recently learned about her, and she's known for her resistance against colonialism in Central America. She was a Garifuna leader. And she fought against colonization. She was also the wife of Garifuna leader Joseph Satuyet. We have Micaela Bastidas in Peru, who was a strategist during the rebellion of Tupac Amaru. We have Juana Zurduy, who was a high-ranking military leader during Bolivia's independence war. She also fought in Peru, in Argentina. And one quick fact about her, a statue of Juana Zurduy actually replaced the statue of Christopher Columbus in front of La Casa Rosada in Argentina. So these are some of the women who have led the struggle since, since pretty much the beginning. And we can talk about some of the women who have fought against the military dictatorships. Our region has been, marked by some brutal U.S.-backed dictatorships. The years spanning from the 50s through the 90s, we had some really brutal dictatorships in Latin America. And I think a lot of the women's struggles in our region have been built in sort of, or marked with important political transformation amidst complex political backdrops like the military dictatorships, often the process of transition from the dictatorship to democratic societies were circumstances that under which mobilizations for women's rights emerged in Latin America. Some of the women who rose up against the military dictatorships in the 70s were mothers who converted their struggles to fight for their children who were being murdered and disappeared and tortured under those military dictatorships. And they took that struggle and basically built their own political category, the mothers of the disappeared, las madres de los desaparecidos, las abuelas de los desaparecidos. Take, for example, las abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo in Argentina, who have been fighting for, since 1977, they've been working to find the children and the grandchildren of those who were disappeared during the military dictatorship in Argentina. To this day, they have been able to find 130 grandchildren and reunite them with their families. Similarly, in Chile, there are mothers and grandmothers who continue that struggle as well. Let's not forget the women who led struggles against military dictatorships, like Las Hermanas Mirabal in the Dominican Republic, and other women who have led uprisings against governments, such as the U.S. government, like in Puerto Rico, Blanca Canales. And in addition, women who have joined armed struggles, like La Comandanta Ramona, who is one of the commanders and one of the most iconic leaders of the Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional.
In Mexico.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are women whose legacy, like, we continue today, and I think they are guiding lights for the new wave of feminist movements in Latin America. The struggle for women's rights in the region has taken many shapes and forms. One of the fronts we're fighting on, is the struggle for women's rights. Women's rights to decide over their own bodies, the fight for gender equality, and this struggle has been intrinsically linked with the fight against the political conditions that perpetuate violence against women. That struggle has been characterized by the fight against patriarchy, and some of the most violent manifestations of the patriarchy, like is militarization. There's been some victories in the reproductive justice struggle. For instance, the legalization of abortion in Argentina that happened in 2020. But consider that only 3 countries in the region have actually legalized abortion: Cuba in 1965, and Uruguay in 2012, and then there's 2 cities, Mexico City and Oaxaca, who also legalized the right to abortion. But like most countries in Latin America, either prohibit abortion or only allow abortion if the mother's life is in danger, or if there's a case of rape or something like that. So we have a long way to go. Women, trans women and girls face disproportionate violence in our regions. This has led to a new wave of feminist movements such as Ni Una Menos, Not One Woman Less, the student movement in Chile, as a direct response to the feminicides and disproportionate violence that trans women and girls experience in our region. And kind of the last point I want to make is the relationship between state violence, capitalism, and gender-based violence. I think we all know, right, that, and it is not a secret, that state structures often service the corporate elites, especially in right-wing governments, where poverty is criminalized and everyone who fights against the system is also criminalized. So the intersection of struggles such as the fight against racist violence, the fight against sexism, the feminicides, and capitalism is not an individual issue. You know, I think this is where the struggle for women's rights and the fight against systemic oppression that perpetuates the conditions that oppress the masses are linked, and a lot of these struggles are often led by women. Take, for example, the Cáceres in Honduras, who stood up against the big transnationals and who was killed, you know, because of what she stood up for. Take for consideration Mama Tingo in the Dominican Republic, who was killed, you know, at the hands of terrateniente. I can't even think of the word. Yeah. Who was exactly, and was killed because she was fighting for her right and the right of other peasants to produce the land, right? The land that they've been working on for years, and which was privatized, right? And Marielle Franco, which I mentioned earlier, killed in Brazil, again, because she was fighting against those, you know, systems of oppression. And so I guess just to wrap up, because I know we want to keep this more conversational.
Yeah.
I know I focus a lot on women who are no longer with us, but whose legacy we are responsible for keeping alive. And at the same time, I think it is important, at the same time that I think it's important to honor those women, I think it's extremely important to honor and uplift the women who are fighting today, the Espys of the world, the Rosita Romeros of the world, and so many other women who are continuing, you know, the fight for gender equity, you know, who continue to work to protect women's rights. And again, you know, patriarchy has permeated every space. We need to uproot patriarchy and gender violence from our movements. Gender violence is not exclusive to right-wing politics. And at the same time that we are demanding better conditions for the working class, you know, building working class solidarity and calling for an end to racism, we should also do our part to not perpetuate the same violence that our oppressors and colonizers have inflicted upon us.
Correct.
So I'm gonna leave it at that, and we can just chat about what's going on today.
All right, so thank you. So before we go on to SB, I wanted to show a short video clip, and we've shown this here before, but you know, I wanted to show it again tonight because I think it really demonstrates what you're talking about in terms of women's leadership. And so I'm just gonna put this on now, and this is one of my favorite videos. It's very short, but it's Ella Baker at a Puerto Rico Solidarity rally in the 1970s, and you know, it is so inspirational in terms of what we need to do. Like you're saying, right? It's almost like she's speaking to us and letting us know that the task is still undone, you know? So I just want to play that real quick.
Friends, brothers, and sisters in the struggle for human dignity and freedom, I am here to represent the struggle that has gone on for 300 or more years. A struggle to be recognized as citizens in a country in which we were born. I have had about 40 or 50 years of struggle, ever since a little boy on the streets of Norfolk called me a nigger. I struck him back, and then I had to learn that hitting back with my fist one individual was not enough. It takes organization. It takes dedication. It takes the willingness to stand by and do what has to be done when it has to be done. It has to. A nice gathering like today is not enough. You have to go back and reach out to your neighbors who don't speak to you. And you have to reach out to your friends who think they are making it good and get them to understand that they, as well as you and I, cannot be free in America or anywhere else where there is capitalism and imperialism until we can get people to recognize that they themselves have to make the struggle and have to make the fight for freedom every day in the year, every year, until they win it. Thank you.
All right. So that was Sister Ella Baker in 1974 at a Puerto Rico Solidarity rally. So I'm going to open it up to SB. SB, welcome. And, we're opening it up to you so you can highlight things you think are important for us to understand.
Okay. Isolina, gracias. Thank you for your powerful reflection. And what I, within a historical context, as socialists, as communists, we go to the beginning of the 19th century, the 20th century, in the early, when Clara Zetkin and other socialist women established International Working Women's Day in reaction to the oppression of women worldwide. It was at a socialist international conference. And also because 124 young women died because of capitalist greed, because the owner of a factory had closed the windows, closed the doors, and there was a fire. And I say children because, at that point, factory workers were like 14 and 15 and 16 years old, working in the worst conditions you can imagine. And they fell out of these windows, broke the windows and jumped out and, and ended dead in the sidewalks of New York, right there where NYU stands. There will be an anniversary on the 25th of March. And we take that history of struggle and we look at women today. As Isolina just looked at women in Latin America. And really, to understand what's happening to women, you need to look at the economic crisis created by capitalism. One of these things that this pandemic shows, the numbers, if you see the numbers of the murder of women, from children up to elders. As the economic situation gets worse, those numbers get higher. As we are socially isolating, those numbers get higher. Because the patriarchy, the powers that be, don't create the safe economic and social spaces like Isolina mentioned to protect women's lives. And no, people who stand against abortion rights, they can't imagine a woman bleeding to death because of a home abortion. People who don't want women to have abortions, and then they allow children to be caged and for children to go hungry and suffer from malnutrition. And they say that they're pro-life. I question what is pro-life. And again, the woman's right to do with her body whatever she wants to, right? So this is the things that I look at on a day-to-day level. And the impact, the emotional, not only the physical impact of the patriarchal rule on women's body, but the emotional, spiritual impact. The numbers of suicides among women has gone up. And what happens is women make choices. Am I going to continue to be in this abusive situation, or I'm going to just take my life? So we're talking about serious lives. Now, when there is great repression, then there is a pushback. People organize. And one of the things is across the world, in the streets of the smallest villages, women are fighting back and creating spaces for themselves and their children and their elders to live. Even though in villages in India women have taken sticks, and places in Africa where they created their own villages, places where women are not allowed to go to school or read, they created their own school. So we will survive. We have survived. And people forget that women are the only reason. Men forget that we have a world. That we have a world. I wanted Mark. I want Mark to play that little video from, and Isolina, you were going to introduce it.
Yeah. So with that whole theme of, we're talking about women fighting back, right? And there are different ways of fighting back. Maybe, Selena, you can intro the video for us before we play it. Just give us some kind of context.
So, yes, so this movement, or this video with these flash mobs started in 2019 on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, which is in November 25th, I think. So dozens of women gathered outside of the Supreme Court building in Santiago de Chile during a popular uprising, and did a feminist flash mob. And this was organized by a local feminist collective in Chile, Las Tesis. The performance was titled Un violador en tu camino, a rapist in your way. And this song and these flash mobs were spread across the world, and is a really, really powerful representation of like, and the lyrics are really powerful because they talk about how women are blamed for the violence that they face, right? And they're fighting back, saying, you were the rapist. And so it's basically fighting against the victim shaming that often happens after women are abused, violated, murdered. And so basically this is the context for this video. And there were marches and flash mobs like this across the world.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna play it now, and then maybe we could talk about this movement and other movements after we listen to it.
Violador
So maybe you could talk about some of the chants, either of you, and for those folks who don't understand Spanish. And
You didn't show the Telesur video?
I thought that was the Telesur video.
No, the Telesur video was translated. That's why I sent it.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't. There was a email, and this is what I was able to get from them.
Yeah.
So, but I think that maybe if you can post on your Facebook page, you can post the one with the subtitles.
Okay.
But just to give a little bit of context to the lyrics, essentially what they're doing is calling out the state, right? Because this chant and the movement and the flash mobs were a direct response to the lack of prosecution to rapists and those who have murdered women, and how there's not justice, right? And at the end of the day, women are blamed for the violence that they face. Basically, they're saying it was not my fault. It was not what I wore. You were the rapist. And then it goes listing to, talking about the president and basically the complicity of the state in protecting perpetrators instead of protecting the victims.
Right. So also, I want to show a little piece. We have some other images here of Vietnamese women, Russian women, Dominican women, Puerto Rican women in struggle and revolutionary struggle. And I think both of you have really brought that out. How we have to fight capitalism, we have to fight patriarchy, we have to fight racism. It's a unified struggle. I think there's a term that I hear some progressives use, which is sectionality or something. But I mean, from my political development, I was always led to believe that these struggles don't necessarily intersect, but that they are one. And that unless you deal with all of them, then even if you defeat the ruling class, vestiges of those systems of oppression remain. And so I'm not too familiar with intersectionality as a term is used, but I've for a long time been taught that racism, sexism, class oppression are part of one struggle, and that when we don't address them as one struggle, then the ruling class is better able to divide us. And so I just wanted to show a little part. And Isolina, you've probably seen one of the videos that I'm about to show, and I think Espe, you've probably seen the other one. And maybe we could just briefly talk about this. This next one is about Dominican women and their role in the war against U.S. imperialism in the Dominican Republic. And it talks about the different roles that they play. So I'm just going to play this very briefly. And I hope that we have time for at least a couple more that we can also view.
La revolución, hay la noche de las sirenas de la realidad, cual clarín que llama la guerra, siguiendo la patria. trinchemos, que la pena y el río encarnó. Si pasamos venceremos como número. No será un paso marchemos, por senderos de gloria y honor. Y otra vez lo venceremos, y otra vez a luchar por más valientes que empezó la revolución a imponer los requisitos que reclama la revolución. Desgarró la noche serena, las sirenas de la libertad, cual clarín que llama la guerra, defendiendo la patria.
Se oyen tus pasos que hacen caminos, se oyen tus gritos de majestad y la victoria que en febrero te ha coronado de libertad. Cantan tus valles, ríos y mares, mi patria hermosa siempre será. Tú nada temes, no temes, y haces un pacto con la verdad. Dominicana, fuerte y valiente, tus hijos cantan de corazón. Abre tus alas, tu caballero, llena de gloria, paz y honor. Dominicana, es tu destino, ser la más noble debajo del sol. Hasta tus manos, como heredero, llena de paz y gloria, vivo seré, bendecida de
So, in terms of that last video, again, it was in Spanish, but the U.S. had sponsored a coup against the elected government in Dominican Republic, and the people rose up and they fought to get rid of the military junta or dictatorship, and then the U.S. sent U.S. Marines into the Dominican Republic in 1965, and all the people, because it was a people's army, and many of sectors of the people's army, especially in different parts of the capital, were led by women, and the women were the leaders. And so I think when we look at struggle on different levels, there can be no struggle against the enemy unless women are part of the leadership and are instructing the revolutionary forces on how to win. So I don't know if y'all want to talk about that.
Isolina? No? You were moved by the video, though, Isolina. Why don't you talk about that?
I mean, what I can talk about is that, yes, I think obviously there has to be, in order for us to, we have a common enemy, right? And I think that in order to fight that, in order to build solidarity, there has to be class, gender, race solidarity. But I think that we also, even though it's one struggle, I think I think the systems of oppression that have been put in place impact some people differently than others. So, for instance, there are barriers that, as a Black woman, as a working class woman, you face that, you know, a white woman may not face, or men, right, may not face. So I think that although we speak about one struggle, we have to speak about intersectionalism and speak about how, I mean, even someone is asking on the chat, talking about the difference between middle class women and working class women's struggle. I think there's a type of access that certain people have in society that others don't. So I think when we talk about uniting, and we talk about class solidarity, and we talk about one struggle, there is the possibility of uniting all those things, as long as there is an analysis, as long as we have that class, gender, race analysis, and we understand how the systems of oppression that have been put in place by our common enemies, whether it is colonization, whether it is, imperialism, capitalism, how those systems of oppression have been designed to keep us separated by race, class, gender, and that is by design. That we are, it's like the divide and conquer, right? And it is by design. And I think there has to be an analysis of how those systems impact certain sectors of society more than others, even if we are all in the same struggle. I don't know if that makes any sense, but SPP, please
Yeah,
feel free
no,
to add.
no, it makes lots of sense. Look, in the 70s, we founded a women's organization. It was called the Latin Women's Collective in the late 70s. Our motto was la liberación de la mujer a través de la lucha obrera. Liberation, the liberation of women through the working class struggle. That model comes out of the struggles of socialist women in the early 1920s. And I fully believe that emancipation of women, one, needs to be women-led, and two, that men have to co-conspire with women to bring down capitalism in our daily lives, in the home front, in the workplace, in the hearts and minds of the brothers. This violence that women face across the line It's not a woman's problem. It's a man's problem, because our brothers have been domesticated and are even more oppressed than the women, because they actually don't see that they've been oppressed. So fast forward, I do healing circles, have been doing them for 30 years in our community. It's an underground movement. And the commitment of the women and the few men who are involved is to stop violence in the lives of women of color now. And that's the commitment. And they understand that it begins with them. They need to transform their own relationship with themselves to then stand with women hand in hand against capitalism. It's not easy. You know, one of the things that I said to them all the time, capitalism got you by your balls. You know, you talk, especially men who are conscious, you talk about freedom and you say you're anti-capitalist, but you got one foot in capitalism. And you need to get those 2 feet out. And the same thing with women, you know, who perpetuate the patriarchy, you know, who go, children are born, male children are born, and they teach them how to be oppressors. So everything is doable, but we as human beings need to transform ourselves. And, you know, we glorify those the sisters that take arms against the imperialists, against the colonialists. And in their stories, they talk about their comrades, their brothers who oppressed them. Right? It is easy to take arms. More challenging for women because we're about life, not about death. It is a real challenge to purge ourselves from patriarchal, racist, and classist views, because that means we got to look at ourselves. I don't know how to manage this, so I don't see the thread either. However, there's no such thing as a middle class. Like race is social constructed, class is racial constructed. We're all workers. That some workers get more crumbs than other workers. You know, why are there so many homeless? Why? Because one day, you know, you are a teacher and you're saying, I'm middle class, and you get fired and you're in the street, right? And all of us who are workers are 3 months away from homelessness. That's a stat. 3 months away from homelessness. People buy houses and they say, oh, my home, right? And my mortgage, I pay it and whatever. You don't own that home. The bank owns that home. And you don't own the land where you build that house. We live in an illusion of capitalism. Go ahead, Isolina. You
No,
got
and I was
something?
just going to say to your point, SB, the illusion of capitalism. This is why it is so much easier for people to feel like they have something in common with millionaires and billionaires and defend them, because they live under the illusion that one day they're going to make it there, instead of and seeing poor people as a problem, or low income people as a problem.
So it's about us questioning ourselves and questioning our domestication and questioning our relationship with money, with having, not having money, the stories that we were told, eh, the belief that because we were poor, grew up poor, that for the rest of the life we're going to be poor. And then what is being rich? You know, everybody wants to be rich. So, what is that? It's looking at all that. One of the most important movements, I think, worldwide is the co op movement, collective work. People all over. The co op movement in the United States has been here for a very long time. People have co opted factories. But imagine if we did more of that. How about people who are not on the grid? Can we stop living the capitalist dream? And of course, the farms. You know, the major issue is we don't have control over the food that we're putting in our bodies. So there's a lot of issues that, yes, Mark, they coincide, they intersect. But the bottom line is we got to question ourselves. We have to question, what do we believe? Down the bottom, what is it that we believe? And how does that play itself out in our day to day life? So I celebrated this Saturday. I was part of the International Working Women's Coalition, Women of Color Group, and we celebrated 40 years or 30 years of activism. And we, anti-war people, peace. So we really, every time this country has had war, we have stepped up and organized against the war. All the work that we do is nonviolent work, even though we support liberation struggles and believe that by any means necessary, and we stand with Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua, Bolivia, any country that stands up against US imperialism. But this group, basically, nonviolence, New York City, eh, movers and shakers among women of color who, when the state, Pro and the state attacked eh, our underground movement and arrested our people and killed many of our freedom fighters, we came together. We came together and, had a conference since 1983 and strategize how we were going to organize. There were 100 women, 125 kids. 100 organizers of that conference. So, and we've worked together for years. And one of the issues that we took on was the case of the Central Park children who were accused of rape. I don't know if people remember that case.
Yeah.
And we supported the parents and we supported the children. And not only were the white feminists up in arms with us, but also black feminists, because the children were minors and their names were all over the newspapers. And this is where your intersection, Mark. And within the feminist movement, in quotes, feminism in Latin America is very different than in the United States, because here in the United States is white ruled. And it's basically liberal, neoliberal feminism, right? To support the status quo, the patriarchy. And we called the woman who was raped's name out. And we were challenged because everybody said they were guilty. And of course, 25 years later, the rapist confess, and those children were let out of jail, and they were men. Lost lives. That's what happened to our people. They either killed them or put them in prison. So for me, in this country, I don't consider myself a feminist. I am a womanist. And I'm a working class, a warrior. And fight back. And sometimes you have to fight back with your own people. Because they have, they have drunk the Kool-Aid. Right?
Yep.
I always tell people, when you go into a bookstore and you go to the women's section, it's not a women's section, it's a white women's section. Because the stories that are being told about are white women. Now you see a few books of women of color, but very few. Racism is operative. Racism and classism in the women's movement, white women's movement, is operative. So yes, there's sexuality, and we could talk about that. But then there's the fact that these women are racist and classist. That there are some women of color, just because you're a woman and what is the new appointed, what is she, the educational whatever for the president of this country. It's a black woman, does not mean that she'll have our interests. The vice president is a white woman whose interest is the police.
Are you talking
So
about
we have to,
Harris, right?
yes.
Okay.
You got to question, just because it's a woman doesn't mean a woman of color doesn't mean anything. Right? So just these are the things that I think is important to keep in mind. And as long, and it's worldwide, so it's not only here, even though this is the worst country in the world that oppresses everybody. But as long as 30,000 children die of hunger every minute, 30,000 children, you know.
Mm.
As long as women, as we speak, thousands of women are being murdered and raped. As long as people don't have shelter and health care, la lucha continúa. The struggle will and is continuing. And yes, many of the struggles, the women are in the forefront
Mm.
because we are the ones who are dying in the largest numbers for nothing,
Mm.
for nothing. Isolina, you want to say anything else? I know I could go on. I get like,
No, I just want to say, Ashe, amen to everything you just said.
Mark.
All right. So, well, I just want to be able to shout out the people who have been posting on the chat, and I've been sharing some of their statements. Usually, I shout them out as I post their statements, but today I didn't do that. I just posted the statement. So I want a big shout out to Shango Sun, Carmen Crespo, Jose Alfaro, Christine Moore, Jewel No. Oh, Isolina, you even have a statement there. you say hi to Jewel No. Christine Moore. And so, I just want to thank the audience for watching our show. We've gone past the hour, but I did notice that Brother Bill had a question or a comment that he wanted to raise for our guests. So I'll go to Bill, and I guess y'all can respond, and then we'll go into announcements, and then we'll start with our closing of the program for this evening. So, Bill, I just unmuted your mic, so you're good to go.
Yeah, I appreciate the sisters tonight. I'm gonna be brief. Because it was a lot said, there's a lot to that could be responded, but I'm not going to do that. But I just want to say in observance of Women History Month and women first and foremost, hopefully it's a springboard to realize that this is just capsulating the awesome job that they do and that they should be exalted and celebrated each and every day. The fact that we have to have a month to recognize them lets them know that they're underappreciated. And with that being said, it's a lot that the two sisters said, but I just want to say, on a positive note, regardless of how you feel about some of the nominations, and I may agree with you in terms of the Vice President Kamala Harris, and also I want to also recognize Sister Misha Ross Porter, who today started, it was the first day of African American women being head of the biggest school system in New York. I mean, in the United States. So even though they may have different agenda, it's the symmetry of the believability that anybody that looks like them can achieve those goals and beyond. Regardless what they do with that is the fact that they're no longer will be the first, and there shouldn't be first when it comes down to women, whether it be African American women or what have you. And also, I want to bring this out too, that there is, when you look at the class struggles that we have, it's all predicated on, I always say, follow the money. It's always a money grab, and it's always dictated by money, even to the point that even if you do have a college education and you are a CEO of a company, it's still class system in which you get paid. White men get paid more than black men. Black men get paid more than women. Why is that? White women get paid more than women of color with the same title. So we got to keep all these things in perspective, and we always realize there's always going to be a fight. It's always going to be about classism. It's always going to be about capitalism. It's always going to be those isms. But just so that we can live and we just look at it from the things that we are able to do that is proof positive, we are breaking the proverbial glass ceilings in certain respect, and we should continue to ascertain that and realize that all things are possible. And I just want to keep it brief. I mean, there's a lot, like I said, that was said tonight. There's a lot that you can go back and forth on, and I agree with that. I think the statement is more accurate that more people is like maybe a minimum of 2 checks away from being homeless. I mean, 3 months. If you got a surplus of 3 months, you definitely in the middle class then or beyond, because it's hard to save money these days. At one time, people had a checking account and a saving account where you actually save money in your saving account and you wrote your bills off with your checking account. Now it's just a matter of preference, but it's really one account. So, kudos again to the presentation, to the things that was brought to the forefront. But end of the day, we know that the women have always been a silent warrior, and they've been the engine that keeps driving the men, and we appreciate them and we salute them and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify though, Bill, is there's always going to be capitalism as long as we don't defeat it, right? Because human beings have been around for over 200,000 years, and capitalism has only been around since the 1400s. So we're always going to fight capitalism until we defeat it. Just like people had to fight feudalism until they defeated it. And people had to fight ancient slavery until they defeated it.
I agree.
So definitely we're on the same page with that. There's always going to be these problems in capitalism until we defeat it, and we're able to create a new system. And it's not like it's going to be perfect, but if we win, we get to shape what comes next. If we lose, then we continue to be the victims and the targets of capitalism. And I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said and just highlight that. So Isolina, Esperanza, we'll let you have the last words, and then we'll go to some announcements, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. So either of you can go first. It's okay.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Mark, Bill, for having me, for having us today, for having this space for conversation. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Like I said before, I think it's great to talk about the legacy of so many of the women who have come before us and whose legacy we should continue to uplift. I think it's really important to support the women today who are doing this work. I think I think sometimes we're very good at talking about all these isms and fight against racism and fight against capitalism and all that. And sometimes we are not as good as sort of like eliminating gender-based violence in our lives. And I think we have to, like SB said, we have to look at ourselves. And this is not just men, this is all of us. We have to look at ourselves and support the people who are doing the work out there. Like there's, many organizations that are working to support the struggle. There's like local organizations that are working to protect women, like the Dominican Women's Development Center. There's also Madre. They do work locally, but also they do work in areas of conflict. We know that, in areas where there's war and occupation, women and children are the primary targets. They're the primary victims. So they do that type of work. Mothers on the Move here in the Bronx and so many other organizations. Just look them up, support, and continue to support the People-Pueblo TV. And I hope this is not the last time I'm here.
Okay.
Well, I want to dedicate my next word to all those young women who are organizing in the streets, who are against police brutality, against male violence, for better education, for better health care. and I hold the rim of their circle. So, it's always important to lift up those moments of real victories, And in the early 80s, we had a real victory. Asada Shakur was liberated, and she's been in exile in Cuba, in freedom, right? In freedom. And we being the Urban Atabeks healing and organizing network, we always end all when we do with the Asada chant to honor her and send her our love and energy because she's on the most wanted list, a, a fugitive in this country, and she's free. And they still want her body and her mind. So think of Asada. Think about Mumia Abul Jamal, who's in prison and he's dying because of neglect, because of medical neglect. And think about all the people in U.S. prisons, and think about the children in those concentration camps on the border. And I say these words for them. It is our duty to fight. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our change. All power to the people.
All right. All power.
Victory is ours.
All right. All right. Thank you, Isolina. Thank you, SB. We're going to go on to, and Bill also. We're going to go on to announcements. On Saturday, April 3rd, the People's United Front, which is a grouping of groups from organizations from Los Angeles, New Orleans, Detroit, Baltimore, Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. We're having a virtual anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-fascist national grassroots conference. The morning session will be discussions around what is fascism, what is racism, how do we organize against it. So the morning is discussion. Our keynote speaker will be Sister Betty Davis in the morning. And then we're going to break out into different breakout rooms. Different organizations are submitting position papers. And then we have a meet and greet around midday so people take a little break and get to know each other informally. And then in the afternoon, we're focusing on our action section. Right now, we're supporting the actions of Amazon workers across the country, including on 125th Street, who work at Whole Foods to be unionized. So, on May Day, on May 1st, we're trying to have a national day of action across the country where we could focus on workers' issues. We could focus against racism, against sexism. We can build our forces so that we can be more effective against the fascists and the neoliberals. And so that's on Saturday, April 3rd, 2021. It's an all-day conference. The morning is about talking. Midday is about getting to know each other a little bit. And then in the afternoon is about action. What actions we'll be taking after we have our discussions. So that's one announcement. Not sure if anybody else has an announcement they want to share. Bill, do you have any announcements you want to share with us?
No, I mean, I'm gonna send you a link. We're doing our women's history program this Wednesday at 5:30. Granville T. Woods.
Oh, okay, Granville T. Woods.
Yeah, yeah. So anybody that's interested in it, just join in and they can just link in. It's open to the public.
All All right, y'all. So thanks everybody for being here. And you know, this show is kind of short, and what it does is that it introduces topics, it brings up some inspiration, it gives hope to people. And then the People-Pueblo Party also has a political education committee that will be holding monthly forums where we can dig deeper into these topics. So our live show is kind of like introducing people to these topics, giving them a taste of these conversations and things to do. And then later on, the Political Education Committee of the People-Pueblo Party will be having more in-depth monthly conversations. And I know Esperanza is on that committee, works with that committee, as well as with other folks, actually some folks who are on the chat today. So, you know, we want to thank everybody for being here today. And we always end with the way SB was ending us, which is all power to the people.
Victory is ours.
All right. Hasta la victoria siempre.